From Los Angeles, Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison.
I've spent a decade taking a bite out of conspiracy theories, unraveling urban legends, and grappling with worldwide top secret issues.
I've even racked up some of their awards.
Wow, first of all, what a question.
Journalism is about telling the truth.
All while ferreting out the bottom line.
I'm a Harrison Hellraiser.
With me, Cary Harrison, as your guide.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison.
And it is Rethinking Heroes. Cary Harrison with you, your new best friend. Welcome. Happy Friday. We are live streaming, of course, on Instagram, one of the great places to see it. We've been getting messages from all over the world, from Lithuania, from everywhere watching us on Instagram. You can check it out, a live stream, The Cary Harrison, or The, if you prefer that pronunciation, Cary Harrison, CaryHarrison. You can also catch us live streaming on YouTube at Cary Harrison. So make sure you do that. And that way you could see your guest upcoming, see our guests upcoming, see your guests upcoming, and of course, your calls. Well, today we're going to expose the hidden tactics of politics. We're going to reveal how politicians manipulate the truth, exploiting the intricacies of human biology to sway your emotions, to shape your opinions and control the narrative, from the subtle art of neurolinguistic programming to the blatant use of fear and propaganda. We're going to uncover the psychological tricks and the biological biases that influence your decisions, where the truth is often a mere pawn in the game of power and manipulation. I'd like to welcome Dr. Melvin Lurie, Phi Beta Kappa Harvard Medical School psychiatrist who taught psychiatry for over 3 decades. I should just check with Renee, make sure, yes, he is there. Excellent. Harvard Medical School psychiatry, 3 decades, focusing on biology, genetics, and evolution. His work includes seminars with 4 Nobel Prize winners, and his specialty of psychiatry gives him a deep understanding of human nature. And his latest is the book, Biology of Politics, a science-based perspective of politics, history, and civilization. Dr. Melvin Lurie, I want to welcome you to Rethinking Heroes.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
We're glad to have you aboard, and many of us forget that politicians are also biological creatures. Yes, upright mammals, actual living beings, though we're not convinced all the time. What underlies what Donald Trump and Kamala Harris represent, or what do they represent biologically, since most of us don't think in those terms?
Biologically, very simply, they represent survival and reproduction. Survival and reproduction are the foundations of life. All species have to have that. Survival's obvious. Reproduction is necessary because people die and you need to be reproduced in order to keep having a species. So survival and reproduction is evident in our society as well. And as it turned out, Kamala Harris is representing more the reproductive values that we have to take care of the most vulnerable at the time and some others. Donald Trump is emphasizing survival aspects of life, and those include a strong economy to be able to bring resources into the family or into the country, and a strong sense of support for keeping would-be intruders out of the home with police and out of the country with the military. These are the 2 factors that are underlying the conflict that we see today. This is why we can't even talk to our family or our friends about this without fearing losing them. It's very hot. Survival and reproduction. That's what underlies what they're talking about.
Doesn't it require us to then believe that that's actually, I believe that Kamala Harris is, just generally speaking, looking out for the American public. Sure, it's politics. Sure, there's a lot of backstory going on. But with Donald Trump, I'm not convinced that this is a good-hearted move to protect the realm from horrible invaders. I see a guy with indictments, sexual predator. I see all kinds of other stuff going on. and pointing to the left, pointing to the right, pointing to the side. And I've never actually seen him give $1 to charity, help a homeless person, or do anything. So I'm wondering if the appeal that he has is in fact that sort of appeal of protecting what's going on outside the cave from getting in the cave, because it works for men like me. It works for people that live in caves, like maybe a lot of his base. But is it genuine or not? I guess that's a whole different thing, isn't it? He understands what men require, which is that adapt or perish.
Well, you see, neither of them is saying they deal with survival and reproduction. This is really what underlies it. But let's take the economy, for example. Who are his supporters? His supporters in general are people who have not achieved survival in their minds. Economy is important to them. And so that's why they like Trump. If people aren't that bothered by, for example, increasing gas prices or food, if people can feel they can get along even though the prices are up, then they might be in the middle or more toward Kamala Harris. And I think it's the economy which he overemphasizes. He emphasizes it without stop because that's what's important to him, and that's what's important to his constituency.
We're talking right now to Dr. Melvin Lurie. Cary Harrison with you. This is Rethinking Heroes. Dr. Melvin Lurie, Phi Beta Kappa Harvard Medical School psychiatrist who taught psychiatry for over 3 decades, focusing on biology, on genetics, and evolution. His work includes seminars with 4 Nobel Prize winners, and his specialty of psychiatry gives him a deep understanding of human nature. His latest book, The Biology of Politics, which is a science-based perspective of politics, history, and civilization. And we're sort of basing our conversation on many of the things that he's written about. Dr. Melvin Lurie, let's jump into the recent political debate where Donald Trump claimed immigrants are eating people's pets, as in stalking and eating the family collie and gnawing on the entrails of the backyard spaniel, perhaps plucking the neighbor's savory kitty cat from its sunny spot on the lawn. Here's what he said.
Or 3, just to go into another subject, what they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame.
ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
the people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So saying their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So, I mean, how do you not laugh at that? Dr. Melvin Lurie, can you shed some light on the alleged biological imperative that Mr. Trump claims immigrants cannot contain? Clearly, this challenge is, well, I don't know. I mean, what's behind that?
You know, a lot of things that seemed preposterous at the time are later proven to be true or to have some truth to it. Sounds like he heard some reports of that. I really have no idea. But you never know. It could be true. And look at how preposterous it sounds. Everyone is focusing on that. And what happens if after the election, of course, it turns out to be true? I mean, I don't know. Who knows if people are eating dogs? People in other countries eat things that we don't eat. So,
well, and certainly in China, dog is actually part of the normal menu. But this obviously speaks to, and we now know that these immigrants are Haitians. So really, it's people of color, Black people like Kamala Harris. It's a great little code once you do just even a tiny bit of research that the Black people are eating your pets. And that can be very frightening, especially, say, in Florida, where 16% of the GOP electorate are white people over 80. And they're going to be really spooked by that. So, I mean, these are effective messages that I think are based on sort of understanding the rudiments of who we are. And that's your expertise and your specialty, is finding that nexus of politics and biology, even sexuality. Similarly, Trump vice president. Did you like that? I didn't mean it. Trump vice president candidate and author.
That's what you say.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Candidate, author of Hillbilly Elegy, J.D. Vance, is said, and we're told falsely now, to have, I'm going to put it politely, rumbusticated with the innocent cushions of the local furniture store couch, all in order to satisfy his psychosexual appetites. Now, that would make Trump a sexual predator and J.D. Vance a sectional predator. Why such a Marquis de Sade level kink in this current political arena that we're seeing?
You know, I'm really focused on what's a lot deeper than this. These are strategies that these politicians use to effect what they want. And some of what they want is conscious, and some of what they want is really unconscious. That's what I'm dealing with. So if they happen to decide that to take one tack or another will help them, well, I mean, that's their decision. Once again, what's preposterous today might be true tomorrow. You really don't know. Couldn't there be a man on the moon? I mean, 100 years ago, that was preposterous. You never know. That's all I'm saying.
You're right. It's just what they're proposing is not something that we all want to see. Like, I want to see a man on the moon, maybe on Mars. I want to see clean water and good schools and maybe a couple of symphonies, but I don't want to see J.D. Vance humping the couch. So I don't want these things to turn out true. I don't want, starving populations of America being reduced to eating bull terriers. Like, this is not an outcome that we want. But you're right. It could unfold that way. It might be prescient in some weird Huxleyan, Orwellian system.
Well, I doubt if it's widespread. In any case, it's likely not widespread.
Let's take a look, Dr. Melvin Lurie, at the biology of politics and how it helps us understand the appeal of populist leadership, leaders like Donald Trump, and what this reveals about human nature. Here's a clip of the former president bragging that his biggest fan in the world is the discredited Hungarian dictator, Viktor Orban.
Let me just tell you about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart, Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president.
Fear, fear, fear. So what are the key genetic and biological factors that contribute to political extremism? And how might we mitigate these influences?
Well, if you want to focus on the extremist aspect of it, there's a very practical reason why there's so much extremism today. And one has to do with gerrymandering, actually. It turns out that when districts are gerrymandered to focus on one party or the other, then the general election is meaningless. The only thing that matters is the primary. So, for example, in a Democratic area, you have two Democrats running against each other in the primary. Well, everyone's there a Democrat. Who are they going to vote for? The one that's moderate or the one that's really Democratic? The same thing has to go on the Republican side. So what you have is people voting for the extremes. That's one practical reason that we have a lot of extremism today. It's what the extremism represents that I'm really focused on. But the practical reason is right there.
We're talking to Dr. Melvin Lurie, Phi Beta Kappa Harvard Medical School psychiatrist who taught psychiatry for over 3 decades, focusing on biology, genetics, and evolution. His work includes seminars with 4 Nobel Prize winners. His specialty of psychiatry gives him a deep understanding of human nature, and his latest book, The Biology of Politics, is a science-based perspective of politics, history, and civilization. And Dr. Lurie, a lot of this, I think, is also based on history. So the human animal, we have ripened and evolved only up to a point, but we're still pulling the same tricks. 80 years ago, in Germany, we see a lot of the same tricks today. Donald Trump famously, in his divorce from Ivana Trump, the central argument of the divorce was that he was reading practicing speeches from Hitler's second book called My New Order, which were annotated speeches and then done more casually as delivered today. But these are sort of the same things. You have immigrants eating dogs is the same as Jews boiling babies or whatever, the same old canard, whether it's World War I, whether it's World War II, history repeating itself, yet none of us seems to remember history. Maybe we don't know history. Maybe we tune it out. What do you think it is?
This is what got me on this in the first place. This is what got me on the first place, because it turns out that civilizations and republics don't last that long. And when you ask historians why, they don't really come up with an answer. Serious anthropologists, they will say that they don't know why the final stressor led to a downfall of a civilization. They will say that flood or famine or war had occurred earlier in that civilization, and that stressor was handled. Why was it not handled in the end? That's what focused me on this. And the reason I chose politics is because politics reflects what's going on in real time in a society. And if that was the only way I could get to it. If you read historians, they talk about royalty and wars. They don't talk about the biological aspects. That's the dimension of history that we're missing, and that's the reason we keep repeating it. We can't learn from it.
Dr. Melvin Lurie, people say that Trump's base is, it's working high school graduates, whereas Harris's base are college educated, or as he likes to call them, the elite. If so, why do you think that's happened?
Well, that's what I was actually trying to get at before. They haven't satisfied. The Trump people have not satisfied their sense that they can survive economically. The whole country has come to feel before China that we can survive in terms of intruders. But in any case, what's happened with the Trump people is there are high school graduates. They're not as confident. It's hard for people who've been to college and graduate school to really empathize with them. They are hand to mouth in many cases. And when Trump talks about the economy, he's talking to them. He's talking to breadwinners, men and women. But the people that have more or less satisfied those needs, then they can focus on what I call reproductive issues. And I'm not talking about sex in the usual sense. I'm talking about the development of each of us when we're in the nest, in the family, and when we grow up. That's when our values and morals are really set down. In any case, that's why Trump's people are Trump's people. That's why they listen to him when he talks about the economy.
You know, I think about different world leaders and their different appetites. JFK famously would splash around in the pool in the basement of the White House with Marilyn Monroe, with or without a bathing suit, often without. We also had LBJ, who famously bent over his secretary over the Xerox machine, back when they were called Xerox machines. Guys with power tend to have lots of women. If they're in some countries, maybe it's a harem. If it's a Mormon, maybe it's a whatever. But there's always interfrastication going on. Oddly, with, let's say, Adolf Hitler in Germany, no girlfriends, no hand kisses, 10 years, nothing, zero. And I wonder psychosexually, if that's even true, what is that? Because no side, the gays don't want to own him, the straights don't want to own him. What with that kind of lust for power, and you have conquered every country with the most beautiful women in the world, why haven't you ravaged them?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting paradigm, and I don't know any good answer for it. By the way, you forgot Bill Clinton in the list of people, perpetrators.
Yes.
But
Yes.
That's power. That's power.
Yeah, I guess if you've got it, you can use it. Well,
yeah, but I don't know about the Hitler thing. You're absolutely right. I mean, that's an interesting aspect to ask about, to find out about. I don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's a decade where there should have been shenanigans going on out the yin yang, but nothing. Meanwhile, we now, thanks to Deutsche Welle, which is the German tax covered news network, we now have drag shows done by the SS. While they're going after the gays, they're doing their own drag shows. So we always find, maybe this is another thing to explore, the hypocrisies that go on. Like the group, the people that are being led, they all have to do X. Meanwhile, the leaders get to do Y.
Well, that's been going on for a long time, and that does have to do something with the biology of people, of society. Yes, we tend to follow leaders. Yes, we tend to believe big lies. That's just we are. We're a social species, and one of the aspects of our lives is that we grew up. We grew up in a dictatorship. We actually did, because we didn't know anything. We were 1, 2, and 3 years old. And there was someone who taught us the rules of society, the rules of interacting with our siblings, for example. The person who made the rules is the ruler. We all grew up powerless in a dictatorship. And so the sense of that has some familiarity. That's one aspect of human life that's so different in America. In fact, when people talk about the shot that was heard around the world, it's really not the shot, it's the knot that was heard around the world. There have been coups since ancient times. So America did a revolution, a coup, but they did not reestablish a monarchy. That's what they did not do. That's what so many people are afraid of now, because they see nations like China and Russia and Cuba and Venezuela as having dictators, monarchs, people that can do whatever they want. And that's what America doesn't stand for. That was the knot that was heard around the world. It was heard in Europe when they got rid of the monarchies. Hasn't been heard in those countries yet.
Let's end, Dr. Melvin Lurie, with how policymakers might harness the insights from your work to create a more effective and harmonious political system that aligns actually with human nature.
Okay, I think one of the drives, one of the genetically determined drives that's out of hand, and it's not recognized as a drive, it's not recognized as such, is the drive to take care of the most vulnerable at the time. Remember, in the family, when we grow up, if we don't take care of the most one, if the older child is bleeding and the younger child is crying, you tend to the one that's bleeding. That's the most vulnerable at the time. And what's happened in our society is we take care of the most vulnerable, but when we know we're doing it, it's one thing. We have a great healthcare system, a welfare system, etc. It's when we don't know what's driving us that we can overdo it. And that's the problem. That's what's going on to a large extent economically, where some people want to spend money on the vulnerable of our society and other people want to be more, if you will, rational or deal with the economics of society. This is an old plan that was really formulated well in 1966. But the reason that it can work is because we're so genetically driven to take care of the most vulnerable at the time. And if we don't recognize that that's what's going on and appreciate it, we'll just keep doing it to our end.
What a great way to end. I want to thank you for joining us, very much for joining us today, Dr. Melvin Lurie, Phi Beta Kappa Harvard Medical School psychiatrist who taught psychiatry for over 3 decades, focusing on biology, genetics, and evolution. His work includes seminars with 4 Nobel Prize winners. His specialty of psychiatry gives him a deep understanding of human nature. His latest book, check it out, The Biology of Politics. You can just Google it, boom, up it comes. A science-based perspective of politics, history, and civilization, a must-have manual in today's world. I want to thank you again for joining us today, my friend.
Well, thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Coming up, we're going to take your calls and get your take on the recent debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Was there a takeaway for you? Did any of it change your opinion? How do you think it landed on the general public? Your calls are next at 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735. Again, your Harrison hotlines, 818-985-5735.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
Listen while it's still legal.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
And it is Rethinking Heroes, RethinkingHeroes.com, where you can go and get our free newsletter where you're going to get a copy of all the shows, all the archives, plus transcripts, so you'll be able to read and digest at your own pace. Anybody that's been interviewed, including read transcripts of the callers, my favorite portion personally, which is what's coming up next. You can also catch this as a live video stream on Instagram. Simply go to, on Instagram, the Cary Harrison, that's CaryHarrison, the Cary Harrison on Instagram, or you can also go to our YouTube channel, which is at Cary Harrison on YouTube. You can also go to rethinkingheroes.com, and there's a link to be able to watch there. Well, not only were we all gobsmacked by Taylor Swift endorsing Kamala Harris after complaining that Donald Trump's website was using a fake AI endorsement, that she said she was simply setting the record straight by being transparent about who she was actually going to vote for. Not that the AI and the former president could hijack her brand and pretend that she was voting for him. It is now off his website. Nobody thought they'd ever see this in their lifetime. Not that, but Dick Cheney, the Darth Vader of the decade of the 2000s, the bringer of death, misery, and torture. He did a massive about-face and also endorsed Kamala Harris, stating that Donald Trump was so corrupt that he should never be allowed access to power again. You know, it reminds me of a pre-AI era when DJ RX mixed this for our Air America show, creating the impossible with George W. Bush. But now Dick Cheney has made it possible for any Republican to follow him and not worry about being wiped out by a vengeful Donald Trump. This was the, coming up, you're going to hear the war president remixed into a John Lennon favorite. It now fits, oddly, as the tables are beginning to turn and the Democratic Party sparks to life with joy, with humor, and a future that people seem happy to embrace. While you're listening, I want your calls on the recent debate and whether any of it changed your opinion on how you thought it landed on the general public. Your Harrison hotlines are 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735, 818-985-5735. And now George W.
Harrison on the edge.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us, only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. The color girls say, take a walk on the wild side. 1, 2, 3, 4. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do that. Nothing to kill or die for. No religion, too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. The color girls say, take a walk on the wild side. Take a walk on the wild side.
Harrison.
Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. The color girls say, take a walk on the wild side.
on the edge.
Very tricky. Peace.
You gotta love that. You just gotta love that. It is turning around the absolute impossible people. Now, Bush has not made such an endorsement, but that version remixed years ago now actually could fit. So let's watch as the tables change. Let's jump to the phones at 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735. Say hi to Eric. Eric, you're on Rethinking Heroes.
Hi, thanks for having me on your show. It's a great show. You're putting out some very fantastic information. My name is Eric, and I think the debate was well. I think it went good, but I think that they used some psychologists or something to prepare Kamala to, as you noticed, when she came in, she walked directly behind Donald Trump's podium. And she violated his space. She went right behind him, and it took him off guard a little bit. But can you hear me?
Yeah. So, the reason she did that, and maybe you were brought up this way, I certainly was. When you walk into a room, you introduce yourself. You look someone in the eye, you shake their hand. And he was, hunkered down in the corner. She did the polite thing, which was also a power move. Let's face it. Former prosecutor. She walks up to this guy, puts out her hand. He's forced to shake it. It's a power move. She knew to do that, and we all watched it.
It was powerful, too. And just to piggyback what you just said, I don't think they talked enough about violence. Back in the 60s, my father and my uncle, they were part of the MK Ultra project as far as being experimented on, and they went on to
They were victims of MK Ultra?
Yes, they're the only identified victims that ever been mentioned. The only true identified victims, Thomas Lee Penn and William Penn Jr., 1966, Richmond, Virginia. And they were experimented on as children at Central State Hospital, as well as at the Medical College of Virginia, and also a Memorial Guidance Clinic. And I have all the records, and all of it's being archived right now as we speak. And so the violence that was committed in the 60s, it was because of the concoction of all the drugs that they were given. They were given psilocybin, mescaline, and LSD, as well as multiple electric shocks. And then when they got out of the institution, they went in as children, and when they got out, they were 18-year-old, and one was 25. And they started having what they call akathisia. Akathisia is a side effect of a drug. Any psychotropic drug, the side effects is almost like tardive dyskinesia.
Yeah, you lose motor control.
Say that again.
I would love to have access to that if you are willing to share that. MK Ultra is now out of the box. We've been talking about it for 10, 15 years here. But now it's being recognized, much as many other government projects. And to bring more light to it and some transparency and truth means that it's less likely to be allowed to repeat. So you'd be doing us a solid to whatever degree you'd like to share that. Shoot me an email,
absolutely.
let me know, and we'll put something together, okay?
Yeah, let me say this. The reason I brought that up to connect it to 2024 is because the young people that's out here now, they're not inside of the institutions being given the same treatment. It's now a societal treatment with the electronic devices that compares to with the type of frequencies that it sends out. It compares directly to the electric shock of the 1950s with Dr. Walter Freeman. But now today, the children that we have out here, these teenagers, they're all on the same type of drugs, Oxycontin, Percocets, and all these different types of drugs, as well as with the overload of the electronic devices. And that's why the violence is going up. And it's going up and up like, almost like I've painted a picture called the doomsday clock. And we're now like a second towards midnight.
Yeah, that was created by Albert Einstein as to how many seconds away, theoretically anyway, we would be to nuclear war at any given time. And that clock keeps ticking closer and closer to midnight. It keeps getting reset and has in considerable measurements, increments in the last number of years. And we are just seconds away given what's going on with Ukraine and Russia, and of course, having Vladimir Putin actually verbally say, I'm thinking about using nuclear weapons. We're not used to people saying that. They may think it, they may plot it, plan it, but they don't say it. So this is disturbing stuff. I want to thank you very much, Chris. I very much appreciate your call. It was excellent. I do hope we'll get to hear more about MK Ultra and whatever you have put together. There are many books on this, but having eyewitnesses, first generation, second generation, important stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I wrote a book about it called
985 KPFK 818-985-5735 818-985-5735. Let's go next to Carlos in Carson. You're on Rethinking Heroes.
Hey, good topic. Good topic. Listen, I just want to base my opinion here between Trump and Harris. Okay, let's compare. Trump is a racist. I admit that. He is very divisive with the inflammatory comments that he makes about different groups, you know. But the economy was better under him than under Biden. Okay.
Well, now, how was it better? How is it better? It's only fair for you to explain how it was better. Was the stock market higher?
It was rampant inflation. You could see it all over the place. Everything went up in price. He never.
But you know why?
Denounced,
you know why it went up in price.
The Reserve Board and told him stop raising the interest rates. He never did that. Okay.
Well, so do you remember? I think you remember the pandemic. I think you remember about 1 million people died. I think you remember that administration was in denial about it. And so a lot of money had to get printed because suddenly there were lockdowns all over the country, and all that money that was printed got flooded into the economy. Money that was printed by Donald Trump, by the way, ended up getting flooded into the economy. The next president, who cares if it's Biden or Fred Smith, suddenly inherits all of that. And we knew there would be inflation as a response. Happily, it's coming down. The stock market as of today is at record new highs. So I don't think you can honestly say, you can say because it sounds good, but you can't honestly say it was better under Donald Trump because it simply wasn't.
Well, it hurt my pocket a lot more. Look, but let me give you a comparison here. You're talking about the printing of money. When Obama left, he had about $16 trillion debt, 16, 17. When Trump left, he had about a 24, 25. And now, under Biden, it got up to 35.
Well, it continues, doesn't it?
Come on now.
It continues.
We both print money.
So,
listen,
who?
Let me get to Harris, okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Harris. We're going to see more liberal policies imposed on the population, more rampant transgenderism, rampant homosexuality.
Let's talk about rampant homosexuality. Let's talk about it. Carlos, you're an expert. You are an expert. You have studied penises, vaginas, areolae. You are an expert on rampant homosexuality and transgenderism. Explain to us what that means, rampant, especially to the people who are gay listening. Tell us what they should be afraid of about themselves.
Transgenderism. It started off very inoffensive, but now you see transgender men fighting women, biological men fighting women in the Olympics. The Olympics had a caricature of the 12 apostles in Christ. Christ was depicted as a transgender.
But it wasn't. It wasn't the 12 apostles of Christ. They were asked. They said, no, it's not the 12 apostles of Christ. It's actually ancient Greece. But you know that because you're a historian. You know that because you've read lots of books. You know that because you're an intellectual and academic. You know that it was actually ancient Greece. You're just kidding us by saying you actually think it was supposed to be a Christian meme.
Look, what I saw there was an obvious intent in the picture that was shown of the 12 apostles. It was
please. You know it was ancient Greece. You know it was Dionysius. You know it was. You're lying to us. You're making stuff up. Let's talk about what you think about gays now. Go ahead with the homosexuality being rampant. Go ahead, let it out. Let people know who are gay what you think of them to their face. To their face, Carlos. Go ahead.
Yes. Homosexuality also started as a very inoffensive the government acceptance of homosexuality, but then it went and became that they started homosexual marriages, which has had a deep impact on our society. Look at the
In what way?
to little kids. Oh, homosexual marriages are okay. Well, that's not the normal situation that God created. God created for the proliferation of the family unit.
Okay. So let's write on your thing. Let's write on your thing. Jesus Christ, the second, Jesus Christ, who wrote in the New Testament everything that mattered, that was important. If it was important, he wrote about it. Exactly how many times did he mention homosexuality in the New Testament? Exactly how many times?
I don't know. I don't read the Bible that much. I read
Zero. Not even one time. Not even worthy of a mention. Let's go back to the original God, Zeus. Zeus, the God of all gods, the original God, Zeus, from which we get Zeus, from which we get the word Deus, Deus, Deuteronomy. All of our Christian stuff comes from Zeus. Zeus's own child, Ganymede, was both simultaneously male and female. Should we get rid of all Greek history and perhaps kill the Greeks while we're at it, because they might remember this and have pottery?
Look, my message here overall is that all these liberal movements are designed to revert back.
It's a movement. Is it a movement? It's a movement to be born a certain way. Carlos, you're born named Carlos. Is it a movement, or were you actually named that? Are you actually possibly Latino, or is it a movement and you're not a Latino?
Oh, I am a Latino. I was born in Mexico.
Okay. So is this a movement? Is this a movement, or is this a biological incident? Is it a movement or a biological incident for you?
I don't think it was a biological incident. No,
okay, so it's a movement. So you're actually a white guy living in Nebraska. You're a white man living in Nebraska, pretending to be Carlos. I'm going to let you go, but I'm going to thank you for your call. I always do enjoy talking to you. Cary Harrison with you. This is Rethinking Heroes, rethinkingheroes.com, where you can get our free newsletter, get a copy of all these shows, plus my favorite, the transcripts of the callers. What a delicious book that I'm going to ebook that I have to put out there. If you really want to know how people think and why, there it is. You can go to rethinkingheroes.com and you can get not only a free newsletter, but copies of all these shows, plus the transcript. And right now we are video streaming live on Instagram. You can go to the Cary Harrison, CaryHarrison. See it on Instagram. There's a bunch of comments scrolling on there. You can also catch it live on YouTube as video. Simply Google Cary Harrison YouTube or go to @Cary Harrison. Coming up, we're going to take more of your calls. We're going to go to Joey in Berlin, Germany. I love this international vibe here. Then we're going to go to, looks like Elaine in Los Angeles. All that and more as we continue with your Harrison hotlines, 818-985-5735, 818-985-KPFK.
Listen while it's still legal.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. Rethinkingheroes.com.
Support comes from Art Don't Sleep and Jazz is Dead.
complete control. We are
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
And it is Rethinking Heroes, RethinkingHeroes.com, where you can get our free newsletter, get a copy of all the archives of the show, get transcripts of everything, including my favorite, the callers. We're talking right now about how you thought the recent debates landed on the general public, what you thought, if it changed your mind. Did you hear anything new and amazing? Did you see stuff that you never thought you'd actually see? A grown-up in public representing e pluribus unum, the United States of America, on the public stage in front of the people of Earth. Were you shocked and appalled, or were you thrilled? Not so sure. Love hearing what you're saying. 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735. Let's next go to Berlin, Germany. Go to Joey. You're on Rethinking Heroes.
Hello, Cary. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for calling in.
Yeah, the debate. So I don't think there could have been a starker contrast between Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's performance, except in the contrast between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. She did a very good job. It was best. I knew she was going to do good compared to Trump, but she totally owned it. She was on point. She really pinned him down. She slapped him down over various things. I listened to the debate first on my phone, but then I watched it on my computer because I wanted to observe his facial reactions, because I knew that he wouldn't be happy with the things that she was saying. And if you go to the part where she says, Tim Waltz and I are both gun owners, that part where she slaps him down over his claim that she's going to take away everybody's guns, you can see in his face, he knows that he's lost it. You can see he actually, he's similar. It's comparable to when Joe Biden did his Medicare brain fart, honestly.
Have you noticed that or heard about, is it a big problem in Europe, what the former president claimed that after babies are born, and they're completely born and now like live humans with social security numbers, that they're being whole cloth exterminated, sort of retrograde abortions. This must disturb the people of Europe, having those of us with nuclear weapons doing that to already born children, if you believe that's happening. Do you in Europe believe that's happening?
I don't think anyone in Europe believes it. Well, no one who is sane in Europe believes it's happening. I mean, it's quite obvious that you can't do that, because as soon as someone is born, they are a person, they have legal rights as the same as anyone of any age. Well, and the same as anyone actually has. And it's a completely different situation. I don't even think that they're doing abortions in the 9th month, to be perfectly honest. I can't imagine that there's anyone who would want to go through the pain of giving birth to a dead baby, basically, because when it gets to the 9 months, they have to give birth to them unless they have a cesarean. It's not the same as an early stage abortion where you just where it's just removed very easily.
Yeah.
But no,
One
I don't
final
think
question.
anyone believes a word that Donald Trump says. He's not taken seriously. Well, the only way in which he's taken seriously is the threat that he poses if he comes to power, because he will. The repercussions of this election will permeate the entire world. It will affect us in the Western world, whether or not Donald Trump is president, for sure, and it's extremely, extremely worrying for a lot of people. But at the end of the day, there's only so much we can do about it. We don't get to have a vote, even though this very much affects us as America's allies.
Well, and to know that the one person that Donald Trump references is Viktor Orban, who 98% of the audience had no idea who he was talking about. Yeah. But this is because you're in Europe.
I think Europeans know who Viktor Orban is. He's a far right leader who is, I mean, he's less of a clown than Donald Trump, but he is a clown. I think if I remember correctly, he had some kind of really camp James Bond type campaign videos made of him. Something to do with, he had some kind of like James Bond type film of himself made that was kind of a running joke for a while. It was because of the fact that he was to be taking over the head of the EU Council or whatever the fuck.
Right, which did happen, and of course, Viktor Orban was behind the whole anti-LGBTQ movement in Hungary, which metastasized, and he personally has been coming over to the United States, been a guest of Ron DeSantis in Florida. All of DeSantis' stuff literally come from Viktor Orban. Viktor Orban speaking at CPAC, which is our conservative convention, having addressed them, given them all these great ideas, none of which are original, but come from there in a giant kumbaya that Donald Trump hopes to stitch up, suture up, and have just, get rid of NATO and hand everything over to Vladimir Putin, who does call Donald Trump a useful idiot. So that way, Donald Trump could be useful and get to build a giant hotel in Moscow that he's been waiting 25 years to build. I want to thank you so much for calling in from Berlin. I know it's late there and appreciate very much your call, Joey. That opens up a line at 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735, your Harrison hotlines, streaming right now on Instagram. The Cary Harrison on Instagram. Check it out. There's lots of cool comments scrolling. Let's go quick to Eileen, who is in Los Angeles. You're on Rethinking Heroes.
Greetings and thank you. I just called to mention that I don't remember Donald Trump mentioning any of his plans, although Kamala Harris, she did mention upholding Medicare as well as education and other things. In addition to that, with Trump, it's interesting that people highlight what he said about the Haitians, who they became the specific scapegoats for him. But it's hard to believe because obviously if they were in Springfield, Ohio, they were given food, I'm sure, enough to eat so that they wouldn't go out and capture other people's pets. Also, I think that Trump and your last speaker, cast a negative shadow on the less fortunate, saying that he said that, things could come to an end trying to take care of them as they're the most vulnerable, but neither of them mentioned the billionaires who now are out in space experiencing, the awesomeness of the universe when, much of their
well, hopefully all of them can go up at one time and stay.
Their wealth has come from exploiting the countries of the less fortunate.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It seemed to lean towards, putting down those who have not, while not even mentioning those who do have because of their behavior.
I appreciate your call, Elaine. We're up against the clock. Thank you so much. I do hope you will call in again in the future, and I appreciate it very much. Cary Harris with you. This is Rethinking Heroes. We're up against the clock, as I said, and it's fascinating to me. As much as people would love to think Donald Trump is a clown, he's not a clown. He's a carnival barker. There's a difference. A clown puts on the makeup and dances around with giant shoes and isn't looking to really have an effect. A carnival barker is the one that's telling you that there's a bearded lady and a lobster boy. And as P.T. Barnum famously did to demonstrate how stupid the public was, this was his opinion. He could not get people, I think I've said this story before, he could not get people to leave the circus at 10 p.m., which was a county ordinance. So he put up a sign, a giant sign that said egress, and put it up at like 9:50, egress, and it kept pointing it toward edges of the tent, and everyone wanted to go see the egress. I mean, who doesn't want to go see the egress? And they all followed the sign for the egress and ended up outside the tent because it was the egress, not the ingress. And this was part of what Donald Trump does. There's a reason he brings up people eating pets, because his base knows these were Haitians. Haitians are people of color. The people of color, like Kamala Harris, are eating your pets. Now, if that isn't a sort of a brilliant, deep political live stage meme to put out there, but I feel great just seeing all the wild memes, all the creative minds, people having fun with this and not just taking it like a punch in the face. The one thing that will always act as a reasonable weapon against dictators and authoritarianism and anybody who has a brain like that is ridicule. Ridicule the ridiculous. The more you make fun of them, they can't stand it and they melt down. You saw Donald Trump's face, his makeup. He was glowering. He had the bronzer on. He had his hair done. Now it's kind of gray and black for the first time ever. It was even it was a toupee, I think, kind of parted down the middle. He looked a little sporty, but he looked like Simon Barr Sinister. No smiling, looking down the whole time, would not make eye contact, a terrifying specter, carnival barker. So I appreciate everyone's participation today. I appreciate your having watched on Instagram. You can catch a copy of this on Instagram. It'll be kept up there as an archive. The Cary Harrison. You can go to YouTube, the same thing. You can go to rethinkingheroes.com, sign up for our free newsletter. We'll send you today's show along with a transcript and other stuff we simply cannot do on the radio. I thank you all so much. Such a joy being here, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Listen while it's still legal.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. Rethinkingheroes.com.